I knew from the second I heard about Crow Country that I had to play it. It's a survival horror game inspired by the PS1 classics that define the genre, taking notes from Silent Hill and early Resident Evil, not only from a gameplay standpoint but also a visual one. Crow Country seemed like it was being made specifically for people who have a lot of respect and love for that era, and I am absolutely one of those people. As I went over in my Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City review, I love Resident Evil. Definitely not that movie.
Leon S. Kennedy. What's the S stand for, stupid? Come on.
But the games, and I'm very familiar with the franchise, even more so now than back when I did that video. While I still think modern Resident Evil is great and has some of the best entries in the series, I do miss the classic style of gameplay found earlier on in its history. So, covering Crow Country was a perfect excuse to get into a similar space again and see what SFB Games has brought to the table. Interestingly, SFB Games is mostly known for developing snipper clips and point-and-click mystery games, so it seems a game like Crow Country is relatively new territory for them, and I'm really curious to see how they'll approach the genre. I love a good survival horror, I love PS1 aesthetics, and it seems like Crow Country is promising to deliver on those and hopefully more. So is that special brand of PS1 horror finally back? Or is Crow Country more like Blow Country? Obviously, off the top, we need to talk about the vibe of Crow Country because just look at this. To be fully honest, more so than gameplay, I knew I was going to play this game just based on how it looks alone. Crow Country excels at not just replicating the hallmarks of PS1 aesthetics, like having liberal amounts of fog and that delicious dithering dressing everything on screen, but also bringing along its own flavor with it. Crow Country is built off of low-fidelity models and geometry with jaggy corners, heavy use of film grain, and creative lighting effects. The inspiration ties Crow Country back to the PS1 vibe it's paying homage to, but I'd say that overall the game has a very distinct look itself. You can draw comparisons with certain elements to different titles, but Crow Country borrows and evolves in all the right places to create its own solid look and feel. Looking at footage of Crow Country, you might be reminded of Resident Evil, but you'd never actually mistake it for Resi or label it as a ripoff. These foundations soak Crow Country in a creepy atmosphere, and from there, everything else falls perfectly into place. The character models feel like slightly higher resolution versions of what Final Fantasy VII had going on, having that blocky look, but here there's finer detail visible. I was also a fan of the monster designs in Crow Country. The standard zombies are serviceable, but the special enemies are where the team really popped off. A good litmus test for a solid horror game is enemies that make you say, nope, and run. A few select enemies in Crow Country, especially this spindly guy, caused me to bolt out of a room as quickly as possible if I didn't have to be there. Sometimes Crow Country will even hit you with an enemy that's kinda cute, and at first you're like, oh, little guy, and then said little guy, and you start immediately throwing everything you have at it. It's cool that SFB nailed the look of enemies while also taking an atypical approach for others. It keeps you guessing, and I never got bored of the monsters during my playthrough. The location for the game is, you're not gonna believe this, Crow Country, a recently defunct theme park, and the game uses that setting beautifully. A theme park existing with the theme of crows already calls for leaning a bit more towards the creepy side of things for attractions and lands. Now out on that, it sat abandoned for 2 years, and you get one of the best concepts for a horror game setting you could ever ask for. The themes for the different locations you explore are all selected carefully to allow the game to reach peak horror atmosphere, but there's plenty of work put into making Crow Country make sense as a theme park realistically. It's maxing out the vibe meter while still fitting together sensibly, and the way everything is assembled and curated with intention elevates said vibe. I was basking in how excellent every single location in the game looks. It's a complete feast for the eyes for anybody into PS1 aesthetics, not just PS1 horror specifically. The artists that worked on Crow Country are insanely talented. Every area has just the right amount of dilapidation going on and looks stunning from every angle. The art is detailed enough that when the camera is still, you might think, wow, those are cool pre-rendered backgrounds they made, but no, the camera is fully manipulable. You can explore these environments fully. The isometric view the game works with is such a brilliant way to show off how good Crow Country looks. I'm so glad SFP went with it. During cutscenes or even just entering a location that I particularly liked, I would position the camera as if the scene was a little diorama and just take in my surroundings, which isn't an experience I've had with very many other games. While Crow Country is a horror game and as a whole is, creepy, SFB Games didn't shy away from cute elements or having fun. There's the chibi-adjacent look of the characters, fun poster designs, and visual design signatures you'd expect from the late 80s/early 90s era the game is set in. There are also silly guys, which is massive for fellow silly guy enjoyers. Shout out to Rotund Crow Plushie and Little Mushroom Boy that upgrades your weapons. These elements shine through in a complementary way. Crow Country doesn't wallow in misery or feel the need to be constantly drab in order to be a real survival horror. There's plenty of space for you to breathe and be reminded that before the zombies and degradation, this was a theme park for children. Now, none of that is to say the game is lacking in horror atmosphere. I hope my points earlier made that clear. For the large majority of the game, all of Crow Country's elements combine together to result in a very moody ambience, scored by an on-the-nose Resi Save Room core soundtrack. But moments where authentic and endearing character is allowed to poke through the fog are far from uncommon. For 2024 releases so far, Crow Country is no doubt at the top of my list when it comes to art direction. It's drop-dead gorgeous, atmospheric as can be, and manages to remain playful with its creative decisions. It pays massive respect to the games that inspired it, but at the same time, Crow Country has a distinct energy, being wholly its own thing. Going past inspiration and working to actually bring fresh ideas to the thing instead of simply doing the thing is an important distinction to make. It's much easier to replicate than evolve, and evolving is what negates Crow Country from feeling like a tacky nostalgia fest, instead coming off as cohesive and genuine. Not to get ahead of myself, but I would go as far to say that Crow Country's vibe makes the game worth playing alone. In good news though, the game has even more to offer. The story in Crow Country follows Mara Forrest, a special agent investigating the theme park and trying to locate its owner, Edward Crow. This seems like a fairly normal setup for a survival horror, but Crow Country takes this premise in a unique direction. There are little to no stakes, at least at first. Mara seems to just be working a routine missing persons case, trying to gather as much information about the shady happenings behind the park along the way. She doesn't arrive with the intention of saving the world from these monsters, and when asked why she's at the park, just states she wants to talk to Edward. Of course, the mystery of the park, Edward, and the monsters begin to quickly intertwine, but her overall goal is simply to find Mr. Crow, and that goal doesn't shift. The low stakes for the story allow the game freedom to put these many mysteries at the forefront of the plot. This isn't Resident Evil. We're not trying to stop Umbrella from spreading an earth-shattering bioweapon. We're trying to get Mara in a room with Edward, and Mara won't be stopped by anything getting between her and that objective. So, as the player, you'll be piecing together all the moving parts through staff memos, character interactions, and journals around the park, while a nagging question will start to inevitably form in your own mind. What is Mara's deal? I won't spoil anything in this video, but the game utilizes Mara as a protagonist very effectively. When things begin to click, the payoff is massive. Everything is recontextualized in a brilliant way, and you'll find yourself thinking back over the entire story, and even seemingly innocuous bits of text you read in the game by the time credits roll. As mentioned earlier, you'll be doing a lot of reading during the game, and Crow Country takes that seriously. It's written so well. Personality is packed in every text box. Notes from specific characters are distinct in style, so when you're figuring everything out, it goes further than just learning more information bullet point style. You're able to gather characters' feelings on things, as well as gain a decent understanding of them as people before Mara interacts with them. It's worth mentioning because I find that in a lot of survival horror, notes are written by someone like Random Scientist Number 4, who will do a dry lore dump and vanish out of existence, but that's far from the case in Crow Country. Even staff memos feel unique when they easily could have all been corporate speak. Crow Country isn't a long game. My 100% completion first playthrough only took around 6 hours, but I finished feeling like the format was fully taken advantage of. There's so much attention to detail, making sure anything the player reads is impactful in one way or another. There's no bloat. Crow Country doesn't outright tell the player the answers to every question they might have by the time the game is over, but for me, the writing was done so well that I didn't need to go check my footage or read anything online for answers. It all stuck so well. Something you might not expect from this genre that's a shining element of Crow Country is that it's really funny. Plenty of notes I read had me laughing, and Mara is hilarious as well. Going back to personality, The humor just reinforced how much there was to be found in Crow Country. The lore is deep and dark, but Crow Country prides itself in not taking itself too seriously, and that adds so much enjoyment to the game. Some scholars may even say it's similar to a small hidden indie gem that you probably have never heard of called, But hey. Seriously though, there's a great balance between the two energies Crow Country is putting out with how it's written, just like with the visuals. It left me wondering why this approach isn't often taken by many horror titles. I didn't even know it was something I wanted to see, but now that I have, I'd love to see more of it. To compare it to another excellent indie survival horror, Crow Country might not be as heavy as Signalis, but the writing in both are close in quality despite taking different paths tonally. Crow Country's story is the unraveling of a multifaceted mystery that'll keep you fully engaged even in small moments. The dynamic tone of the writing isn't commonly found in the genre, and it makes for a very successful experiment that completely subverted my expectations in a great way. While Crow Country pushes and pulls the survival horror genre in many aspects, I wouldn't say it does that when it comes to gameplay. Crow Country's gameplay is very in line with the rest of the genre, and that's not a bad thing. It might not be very unique, but it ticks all the boxes that a game like this should. You're in a big map full of puzzles that you have to work through to get items, open doors, and discover NPCs that will open the map up further and allow you to progress. That's the real meat of Crow Country, so how are the puzzles? They're pretty good. Crow Country doesn't have the hardest or most complex puzzles, but it has a nice variation and doesn't hold your hand at all, so it feels very rewarding to encounter a new puzzle type and figure it out, or finally get that missing piece you needed to solve a puzzle. There is a hint system in the game, but I didn't use it during my playthrough, and looking online now, it seems like the hints mostly just point you in a direction and don't outright tell you the answers, which is the right way to go about things in my opinion. My favorite puzzles in Crow Country are the ones where you're not given complete information to solve them and have to rely on context clues or use a bit of deductive reasoning to get to the solution. I always love when a game gets me taking notes. It makes me feel more directly involved in coming up with an answer, and Crow Country does this a few times. There was only one puzzle I got stuck on, and in a shocking turn of events, it turns out that was entirely on me. When I was checking my footage, I saw that there was possibly the most obvious hint in the world for the bit I was having trouble with, and I just didn't process that information for some reason. The worst thing I can even say is that diagrams should be included in the book of memos you're able to check in safe rooms, because taking another look at that one would have been helpful, but again, it was my fault. So I did get stuck on one puzzle, but it led me to discover something interesting about Crow Country that I would have missed if that never happened. When I was attempting to do the solution of the puzzle, I got a text box saying there's something I need to do first. My solution was right, and I was just missing one step I could have done right there and then if I remembered the diagram I saw, but since I forgot about that, my brain thought I must have missed an item or something. So I went and did a bunch of puzzles that turned out to be unrelated. If I never got stuck, I wouldn't have known that Crow Country allows you a bit of freedom with how you progress in the game and doesn't follow a strictly linear order of objectives. Being able to take a break from a puzzle you're having trouble with while still being able to move forward in other areas makes the whole ordeal of getting stuck a lot less frustrating. Eventually, I got to the point where I knew I couldn't possibly be missing anything, so I went back and brute forced my way into figuring that first step out. Afterwards, all the other exploration I had done in between being stuck and the solution paid off. I was able to catch up quickly to where it felt like I would have been if I wasn't stuck in the first place because the other work I was doing was still meaningful progression. In the end, getting stuck didn't even matter. And that's massive for any game that heavily features puzzles. One thing I would have really liked to see included in Crow Country is item inspection. SFB Games has a new title coming out in their point and click series that has this as a highlighted feature, and I wish it was implemented in Crow Country. Even just being able to look at the models for items a bit closer would have been cool because of how nice everything looks. But item inspection just feels like one of those classic survival horror mechanics with so much utility, and I felt its absence in Crow Country for sure. Despite the very minor critiques I have, the puzzles in Crow Country are solid, and importantly, they're also fun. They're easily the highlight of the gameplay, and having great puzzles is a necessity for the genre. If it doesn't make me feel like the thinker, I don't want. The other half of the gameplay is the navigation of the park and its monsters, which Crow Country takes a very if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality to. Really not much is done to shatter expectations in this department, and that works for Crow Country. You have to find a balance of when to fight enemies and when to run by. Make sure you're careful with your limited resources like healing and ammo. Combat feels good for the genre in context. Mara is slow to draw her gun, and aiming with precision can be difficult, which adds that pressure to encounters that you're looking for in this type of game. There are a handful of different enemy types with their own behavior that you'll learn over time and figure out how to deal with in the most efficient way. All those elements are pretty consistent across the genre. There are small variations here and there, like inventory management being absent except for item limits, but the overall feel of Crow Country will be very familiar to fans of survival horror. One thing Crow Country does add in here is traps that will randomly generate when you enter an area. This could have been a good addition and would add some risk to general exploration or upping the pressure when running from enemies. However, the camera is punched in pretty tight, so a lot of the time when you get hit by a trap, it feels like it came out of nowhere and can be annoying. Easily 3/4 of the antidotes I used in my playthrough came from the gas traps poisoning me unexpectedly. I think adding clear audio cues or pushing the camera out just a bit more would make this mechanic work a lot better. The intention with it is clear, but in execution, it is in fact dumb and bad. While the gameplay in Crow Country doesn't shake up the space and turn the genre upside down, it works perfectly for what it's trying to be, and I personally had very few issues with it. It's engaging and fun with a good amount of tension through and through. Crow Country feels familiar in all the right ways, and I think a lot of fans of survival horror will appreciate that. Now, through this whole video so far, there's an important question I haven't addressed. Being a survival horror, you gotta ask, is Crow Country scary? No, it's not really. Creepy? Absolutely. Atmospheric? Insanely. Crow Country might not be outright scary or even as scary as your average game in the genre, but it stands out with that lack of scares and screams by clearly not taking itself so seriously. As soon as you start playing Crow Country, you'll pick up what they're putting down, and from there the game just overloads you with its distinct charm and vibe. Crow Country is one of my first experiences in the genre that I can honestly say was funny and had a great balance of dark and levity throughout. The story still has weight, but SFB Games wasn't interested in exclusively being gloomy, and the decision to go that route is what got me from expecting to like this game to ending up loving it. Crow Country is magic. It's a very unique take on this breed of game that dares to be bold by pushing the traditions of what can be done with a survival horror while still retaining enough of the bones to remain under that umbrella. Crow Country put in the work to take inspiration without compromising its own identity by iterating on those inspirations and creating its own signature style that will remind you of the PS1 era without coming off as a gimmick or unoriginal. I was dead set on playing Crow Country from the second I saw how it looks visually, and I'm happy to say that it offers so much more beyond that. Yeah, the visuals and atmosphere are so good that in my opinion the game is worth playing just for them, but the experience doesn't lean on the eye candy factor at all. The whole package is stellar. There's no fat to trim in Crow Country, even if you go for full completion. By the end, I felt I had spent the perfect amount of time in this world with these characters, and none of my criticisms had room to really wear on me significantly and bring down how much I enjoyed my time with it. I would love for SFB Games to take this exact engine, aesthetics, and vibes and create another game with a new premise. I think they have massive potential to keep refining and build a series out of it. You should do yourself a favor and play this game. If you're still unsure after hearing me ramble on about how much I love it, there's a demo on Steam you can play yourself to see if it's something you like. For me, Crow Country is one of my favorite releases so far this year and a surprisingly fresh breath of air in a genre that seems very difficult to navigate expectations within, and SFB has 100% earned my attention for whatever they do next. Hey, thanks for watching another GhoulFMV classic. Since you watched the whole thing, why don't you go ahead and shoot that subscribe button in the head if you want to see more from me. Speaking of subscribe moment, the channel's really been popping off lately, so I wanted to say a quick thanks to everybody old and new for being so kind. The response to my last few uploads has been really encouraging, and I appreciate all the support. It means a lot. If you have anything you'd like to see me cover, feel free to leave a comment. Ideas are always appreciated. Aside from that, you can find me on Twitter and Blue Sky as GhoulFMV if you want to keep updated on the channel and such. Anyways, I'll see you soon, and as always, love you.